means that the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons.
Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft? Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft?
Basketball!
Select Isaiah Stewart.
The Detroit Pistons select Killian Hayes.
Sadiq, that was absolutely sensational.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
From long range. Oh! Yes!
Detroit basketball! Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, and joining me, as always, and as it traditionally has been, Aaron Johnson. Aaron, how are you doing, buddy?
We're throwing it back, Mike. I mean, this is the duo that started the podcast. I mean, however many years ago it was now. I mean, what, 6-7 years ago ish? But
yeah. We don't have to get into the specifics of how long.
We're old. But no, it's good to be here. We were talking about Love the Air. You know, the weather's nice right now. Beautiful day. That always gets you going a little bit just after being, you know, especially you and I, Michigan and Ohio, two states that tend to get the harshest part of winter with all the snow and cold weather. So it was nice, you know, both of us were talking about that 60+ degree weather and how nice that is. So I got a little bit of extra juice in me today to talk about the Pistons, and I got a couple good topics to talk about. So looking forward to getting into that. And we missed Jasper, but hopefully we'll have him back next week.
Yes, and you had mentioned the perfect time of year, and that would be March Madness, and that would be the Masters, and baseball decided to be good sports and figure out their labor disputes, and baseball's back. It's been a really weird time with baseball free agency and NFL free agency happening at the same time. It's been a very weird double barrel action of news constantly hitting. So it's a really nice time of year. Baseball, the Masters, of course, and March Madness. And that brings us into our sponsor for today, which is BetOnline. It's that time of year as college basketball takes center stage with the tournament finally upon us. If you're looking to wager this year, BetOnline is the number one spot for all your updated odds and info, along with great contests, including the bracket contest, where you have a chance to take home a top prize. Head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV to get started. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting, your favorite Vegas casino games. Again, head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using the promo code BLEAV. BetOnline, where the game starts. We will get into March Madness a little bit later, and I'm having a particularly difficult time with some matchups in my bracket. I feel like it's a really chalky bracket, and I don't know if I'm just missing something, but we can get into that later. Our first topic for today is some potential interest from the Pistons in Mitchell Robinson. According to Newsday, the Pistons are among teams who are interested in Robinson, who's going to be a free agent this summer. A few other teams have also shown interest in Robinson, and there's been a few other reports throughout the year that Detroit is interested in Mitchell Robinson. There was some speculation that they would pursue him at the deadline, which obviously didn't come to fruition. They instead got Marvin Bagley for probably considerably cheaper. So, Aaron, is Robinson a good target for the Pistons this summer? We've talked a lot about not having a rim runner, not having a rim protector. Is Mitchell Robinson, who has dealt with a lot of injuries on the New York Knicks, is he a good target for the Pistons?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of fits the mold of what Detroit needs going into the offseason. You know, I've talked about it before, and I think Jasper is on the same page. I don't know quite how you feel, but I view Isaiah Stewart long-term as a bench energy big. I think he's a good guy to have coming off the bench, could start if necessary, you know. So in theory, with a guy like Robinson, he has missed, you know, handfuls of games. Last year, he spent a lot of the season injured. This year, he's missed 6 games. And then his first 2 seasons in the league, he missed, you know, around 15, 20 games each year. So injuries are definitely a bit of a concern with him, but he has been pretty healthy this year. But again, in theory, if he was had to miss a game here or there, Isaiah Stewart's a guy that comes in and can start. But I think his best role long term is for him to be an energy big off the bench, and so that does mean the Pistons do need a starting five. And I think Mitchell Robinson is a really nice young player right now. He's shining with the New York Knicks. He's had, I believe, 5 double-doubles in his last 6 games. He's playing really good basketball. He's 7+ feet tall. He is super, super athletic, jumps out of the gym, defends the rim. He is exactly the type of player that the Pistons should be looking at in free agency. Now, he will be he will be a restricted free agent in July. So I do think that it's going to be an interesting situation with him, because he's the type of player that's going to have a lot of different teams interested in him, but I'm sure the Knicks are also going to want to keep him, and he's a restricted free agent. So, does Detroit, who's one of the teams that has the most cap space available this offseason, do they become, what was it, the 2016 Brooklyn Nets, who just are throwing pretty sizable contract sheets at numerous restricted free agents? Do they become that team that takes a big gamble and offers Robinson, 10, 15, 20 million more dollars overall compared to what other teams have offered, or to what the Knicks are willing to pay him? Do they buy into, do they believe in Mitchell Robinson that much? I think that's definitely a question that I'm looking at. And, I don't know if I'd want to overpay on a guy like Mitchell Robinson. The Pistons do have Marvin Bagley as well, who they've been using at the center spot. And he is another athletic, springy type big, and we've seen him really shine in his short time with Detroit. I think it's only been 9 or 10 games that he's played in so far, but he's looked very, very good with the Pistons. And then they still do have Kelly Olynyk under contract. He's under contract next season, and then there's a team option for the year after that. And the Pistons are going to have to make a decision on Bagley this upcoming offseason, because he'll be a free agent. So, I don't know how much cap space Detroit's going to want to spend. I would imagine they're going to want to keep Marvin Bagley, considering the way he's been playing. But if they do, I'm not sure, do they also want to spend on another center in Mitchell Robinson when they still have Stewart under contract and Olynyk, and if they bring back Bagley? But Robinson would be a good piece. And if the Pistons, for some reason decided or were able to trade Kelly Olynyk, or decided that they don't want to retain Marvin Bagley, Mitchell Robinson's definitely a guy that I could see them going after. He is a type of player that would succeed on the Pistons and would definitely help this team. But I don't know if he is going to be a Detroit Piston, despite all of the different reports we've really had throughout the year about Detroit's reported interest.
I think you hit on an important point, and that's the other players that are in the realm of position alongside Mitchell Robinson, Kelly Olynyk, Isaiah Stewart, were the 2 or 3, along with Marvin Bagley. And I agree. I think the Pistons are going to keep him. At what number, I don't know, but I don't think they would have traded for him, and only worked with him for really like a third of the season, maybe less, like a quarter of the season, and then said, never mind, we don't want him. So I feel like they're going to keep him. Isaiah Stewart's obviously part of the future. Kelly Olynyk, they signed, so you have some dollars allocated to him already. And you're looking at another kind of big in the draft as well, pending where you end up in the lottery. But, you're looking at a lot of bigs. And, yeah, some of those can play the 4. And I agree with both you and Jasper. I think Isaiah Stewart's best suited as a high-energy bench guy, which we've seen he can excel at. Yeah, I'm lukewarm on Mitchell Robinson. I think he's obviously a good player, but with free agency being a little bit not quite as lethal in terms of high-end players as it usually is or could be, you might see some teams offering very high offers, like you had mentioned, going the 2016 Brooklyn Nets route and just trying to, gouge the Knicks. So they could do that, but I'm lukewarm on him. I think you're going to end up with a lot of bigs, and obviously you should draft best player available regardless, and not sign Mitchell Robinson and then determine you don't need a center. I don't think that's how it should be. You should be going for best player available. But with a glut of bigs, and you can move them around, but the value of Kelly Olynyk has been shown, being able to stretch the floor a bit. Marvin Bagley being an offensive weapon. Isaiah Stewart being a high energy guy. I think you're okay for the most part. I mean, and I'm not sure what kind of number Mitchell Robinson is looking at either. I mean, if there's a lot of teams interested in him, I feel like there would be in a 23-year-old, almost a 24-year-old 7-footer. You may be competing, and I don't want to see the Pistons competing and upping the ante consistently to try to price match with other teams. I don't think that they should be going to that extent for him, but he's an interesting player. He's very athletic, which they definitely need at the center position. And they need a rim protector, and the defense for him has been a little bit, the plus minus is really wonky because the Knicks have been really bad this year, but the defense has not been as good with him on the floor this year as it was last year. And the year before that in 1920, it was much better than it was in 18-19. So I'm lukewarm on Mitchell Robinson. I definitely believe the interest. The Pistons are one of the few teams that are going to have cap space to burn. I don't want to burn it on necessarily a player for the sake of burning it, but Mitchell Robinson definitely is more appealing than some other older guys. I mean, he fits your wheelhouse at almost 24 years old, and he does theoretically fit a need as a rim protector. So the Pistons should definitely be poking around for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if they can get him at the right price, obviously I think it makes a lot of sense. I keep coming back to, the more that I think about it, they have 3 guys that play center that are going to be on the team next year if they re-sign Bagley, and I just don't know where Robinson fits in, or if it makes sense for Detroit to spend cap space on him if that's the case. Now, I know Olynyk and Bagley can both in theory play the 4, but the Pistons have Jerami Grant at the 4 spot. Some of these top prospects in the draft play the 4 spot. So, I think that whatever happens in the NBA draft is also going to dictate what where Detroit looks in free agency. I mean, if they end up with one of these top 3 picks and end up with a Chet, a Paolo, or a Jabari, and it's another, 4 kind of, if you're Chet, a 4-5, if you're Jabari or Paolo, a 3-4, is Detroit looking to add another big to the rotation, or are they looking for more guard help? And then, if they end up with someone like Jaden Ivey or Ben Mathurin, are they then looking for another big? And, so I think the draft is going to dictate a lot of Detroit's mindset in free agency. And I think the Pistons also have some other areas that they do need to figure out. I think they definitely need to kind of overhaul the point guard spot. If they're going to play Cade Cunningham at the 2, then they really need to figure out where they're going at the point guard spot. They need to find a guy to play alongside him long term. And, I don't know if that's necessarily possible in free agency, but they're going to be looking for help there. I don't think there's a question about that. And then they still need more depth on the wing behind Sadiq Bey and Jerami Grant. They have Hamidou Diallo. Frank Jackson is a team option. Will they trust Isaiah Livers enough? I know we talked about him a little bit last week, and he's continued to play well since entering the rotation, but everybody needs 3 and D wings in the NBA nowadays, and the Pistons need more shooting. So that's absolutely going to be a target for them. I just think, when it comes down to it, as of now, I'm expecting the Pistons to re-sign Marvin Bagley to figure it out with him. And if they do, I just don't know if that means they need to go get Mitchell Robinson. And that doesn't mean they can't go get another center. I feel like Robinson's market, around $10-12 million. Let's just theoretically put it there. It could be higher and maybe it's lower, but in theory, if it's around $10 to $12 million a year, do the Pistons want to put that money into him instead of maybe going after someone that they can get cheaper, like a Dwayne Dedman or I don't know, other names that are going to be on the market. Like there's someone like Naz Reid. He's a team option, so he probably won't be available. But the bottom line is, are they going to want to spend $10 to $12 million on another center when they already are paying 3 bigs right now? I mean, Bagley's probably going to get a handful of money, and Olynyk's under contract for around $13 million a year. So I'm just not sure Robinson is necessarily the going to be the guy for Detroit in free agency, although he is a good player and he should have plenty of teams interested in him.
Yeah, he definitely will. And, at the end of the day, I think there are other needs that are more pressing. The Pistons need shooting. They need offensive help. They need shooting. And Mitchell Robinson's obviously not going to give you that. I would prioritize shooting first, and especially if you're looking at a big in the draft. Obviously you have to make sure that young prospect, whoever it is also insulated with vets. But I think that's already kind of handled with Grant and with Kelly Olynyk. I think we're good there. You had touched on it. They have other needs. Shooting is definitely one of them. They need a shooter. They need to figure out what they're going to do at the 2 guard, because obviously Cade and Killian is not looking like that's going to be the pairing. So they need a shooter for sure to take at the bare minimum to take some pressure off of Cade. And Sadiq Bey is showing glimpses of being able to do that, but you need more. It's a lot like starting pitching in Major League Baseball. When you think you have enough, you need to get more. Well, the Pistons don't have anywhere near enough already, so they need to be bulking up. But they should be poking around just to see what Mitchell Robinson's market is. I think you hit on another important part, and I agree. I think looking at backup bigs at a lower cost, probably a better idea. You might start to get diminishing returns at Mitchell Robinson at a certain price compared to what you could be getting, like a Dwayne Dedmon, a guy like that, Naz Reid as well. Although, like you said, he does have a player option, so he's probably not going away from Minnesota. But I like that line of thinking a little bit more, getting another backup big that's lower cost, maybe another vet. If you end up drafting a big, that's fine. And then focusing your free agency dollars on getting a scorer. I think that would pay greater dividends in the long run for sure. So speaking of scorers, Jerami Grant has been having a better time, let's just say, post All-Star break. While most of his stats have remained pretty consistent, he has a net rating that's much more palpable. His role has been a little bit different in this offense, and his play has personally, and we talked about this last week and I think the week before, it's started to prove your point correctly that they should have stuck with him. I think he can carve out a role on this team as the clear not number 1 option, as the number 2 option, and really he probably ideally as a 3 option. But he's been playing much better as of late. His net rating was a -7 pre-All-Star break. It's improved, quote unquote, to a -1.2. And again, net rating is very difficult to gauge on bad teams because the team is in total is bad. So of course the net rating is going to be lower. But he's been having some success. And you were the champion of keeping Jerami Grant. Don't trade him just for the sake of trading him. This play has instilled more confidence in me that you're going to keep him into the offseason and hopefully the next season, right?
Yeah, well, he's eligible this summer for a 4-year, $112 million contract extension. So, if the Pistons are interested in retaining him, I think it's possible that they extend him this summer. With I know they have a lot of cap space, and I know it wouldn't kick in until the year after, so that necessarily doesn't matter. But I think Detroit would kind of like to figure out where he fits moving forward. And I think if they do want to keep him, I know there was some speculation at the end of the trade deadline that the Pistons could still move him this summer around the draft on draft day. That was something that Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN also mentioned. So I'm not saying that that's out of the realm of possibility. That could very much still happen. I mean, there's, 13, 14 games left in the season. So things can happen. Things can change. And I think kind of like Mitchell Robinson, where the Pistons end up in the draft could impact this as well. I mean, if they end up with a Jabari Smith or a Paolo Banchero, and they have Sadiq Bey, who they probably are intending to build with moving forward. Does that make someone like Jerami Grant a little bit more expendable, or do you find a way to make it work and try out different lineups and stagger players? I mean, just off the top of my head, do you try something with Cade at the 1 and Sadiq at the 2, and then you have Jerami Grant, you have your Jabari Smith or your Banchero or even your Chet Holmgren, and try that out? I mean, I just think that wherever the Pistons end up is just like Mitchell Robinson going to impact their mindset with Jerami Grant. And I think it's a lot easier to see this team building with Jerami Grant and trying to extend him if they land, outside of the top 3, or maybe Jaden Ivey gets into the top 3. So they end up with a forward. Let's say they end up with a guard. It gets a lot easier to build around and build with Jerami Grant rather than if you get a Paolo, a Jabari, a Chet, because then it raises the question of, well, where does this new guy fit in if he's a part of your core? This is a top pick, so you obviously have very, very high hopes for him. So he needs to be playing a lot of minutes, and in most cases he needs to be starting. So that's a question that Detroit's going to have to look at. I think Jerami Grant has earned the right to continue to have the opportunity to be a part of this franchise moving forward. He's played very good basketball post All-Star break. I think Dwayne Casey has earned some credit for changing up the offense. And since Jerami Grant has come back and Cade Cunningham has taken control of the basketball more, they're running the majority of their offense through him. And that's allowed Jerami Grant to become more of a spot-up shooter. When he's taking those mid-range or post-up shots, they're better looks for him because he's been more picky about it. The Pistons have not just turned to him and had him come up from one of the boxes down low, come up to the free throw line extended, catch the ball and isolate. They've pretty much eliminated that from their offense outside of here and there throughout the game, which is totally okay. You can give Grant a look or two throughout the game where he does that, but it's become far less common, and it's allowed Grant to get easier baskets. It'll allow him to be an athletic finisher at the rim and allow him to shoot from outside the arc. That's how you maximize a player like Jerami Grant. And Dwayne Casey's stylistic changes to the offense, putting the ball firmly in Cade Cunningham's hands more, has really helped. And Jerami Grant's also making a really impressive impact on the defensive end as well. And I don't want that to get overlooked because there was a lot of talk about his drop-off defensively last season and even at the beginning of this season. And part of my thought process was always that, look, if a player like Grant, who was a defensive stud in Denver, was a third, fourth option offensively, then becomes the number 1 option on offense on another team, his defensive intensity is obviously going to drop a little bit. He's not in that upper echelon of a Kawhi Leonard or a Paul George where you can be a top scoring option on your team and still be in the top 10 upper echelon of wing defenders, perimeter defenders. And so Grant taking a little bit more of a backseat, even though he's still scoring around the same number of points, and his efficiency just from field goal and 3-point percentage has remained relatively the same. He's made a lot greater of an impact defensively. His rebounding has gone up a little bit. His rim protection is much more noticeable. He had a very, very nice defensive play against Bam Adebayo, meeting him at the rim and blocking him in Detroit's loss against the Miami Heat. But Grant is really playing good basketball. I think he's earned the right to be a part of this roster moving forward if the Pistons and Grant decide that's what they would like to do. And I think the fit is there. We saw the Pistons. I know they have now lost 4 in a row, but before that, when they were won 6 of their last 10 or whatever it was, we saw Cade, Sadiq, and Jerami leading the Pistons every night. Those 3 guys were getting it. And then you lost Isaiah Stewart. Then you didn't have Cade Cunningham against Miami. Sadiq Bey's gone into a shooting slump that isn't on anyone but Sadiq Bey. I mean, that was something that was talked about at the beginning of the season was, Sadiq Bey and Jerami Grant can't play together. Look at Sadiq Bey's numbers. And, I always thought that was unfair to just put that on Jerami Grant and not put that on the actual player that's struggling. And I think we're seeing that, now in this little bit of a rough stretch for Sadiq Bey shooting wise. It's not on Jerami Grant, all the opportunities are there for Bey. He's just missing shots. And credit to Bey, he's found other ways to impact the game. He's rebounding. He's become a little bit more of a facilitator as he waits for that shot to come back to him. But Jerami Grant has been very, very stable post All-Star break. And I think he's the type of guy that the Pistons should want to have on their roster. Athletic wings that can space the floor and defend on the perimeter and play help side rim protection. Jerami Grant's that kind of guy. Teams need those kind of guys, and that's why he was one of the most sought-after names at the trade deadline, and it's why he's going to be a sought-after name again this summer. The teams are going to want him, and the Pistons are going to have to make a decision on whether or not they want to build with Grant moving forward.
Jerami Grant, in the 11 games since the All-Star break, he's been averaging 19 points, 3.5 boards, 2 assists per game. On 43% shooting, he's shooting 34.8% from deep. Look, I agree. I think in terms of making a move in the offseason, the Pistons are going to have to, they're going to be faced with the opportunity to trade him again. They're going to be faced with the opportunity to extend him. And at the end of the day, that's going to be a turning point for the season. If they get overwhelmed by some team for him, then, he's probably going to be dealt. That's the smart thing to do when you're a rebuilding team, is to maximize your assets. He has played a lot better. The defense has definitely picked up considerably. It was very apparent in the first half of the year that he was not quite there defensively on the court, nearly as much as we're used to. But the Pistons did win 5 out of 7 at one point out of the break. They have lost 4 in a row. Like you said, Grant had to take on a little bit more of the offense with Cade out against the Miami Heat. He responded by putting up 22 points on 8 for 20 shooting. So, it's clear that his role is not as the primary scorer facilitator anymore, like it was last year when he was the only guy on the court that really had an idea of what he was going to do in isolation or whatnot. So it'll be very interesting once we get closer to free agency and the draft, seeing what offers come in for him, seeing what teams are willing to give up, but also how he finishes out the rest of the season as well. It's going to impact what teams offer. So it's going to be an interesting watch down the end of the season here. And those post All-Star game or All-Star break numbers are a little bit skewed. He did start 7 of 30 in those first 2 games against the Cavs and the Boston Celtics. So he came out of the gate cold. He proceeded to shoot quite a bit better the next like 5 games. He shot considerably better from the floor, and 4 out of 5 of those were wins. So he does have a role on this team for sure. And, I think that the Pistons would be wise to at least consider a contract extension. So I'm really just glad he's playing better. We talked about Jerami Grant endlessly leading up to the trading deadline. So it's nice to be talking about more positive things heading into an offseason where the Pistons are looking to have a really high-end lottery pick and hopefully the last real game changer. And Jasper and I talked about, I think it was the podcast where you were out. This will be my last question, then we'll get into our last topic, which is March Madness. Is this the last lottery that the Pistons should be picking top 5? Like if the Pistons are picking top 5 in the lottery next draft, would that be that's a bad sign, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a roster with Cade Cunningham, Saddiq Bey, as of now, Jerami Grant, and adding a top 5 pick. That's just, there's no excuse for next year for them to be another lottery team or, a top 5 pick, unless they somehow got super lucky in the lottery and, they missed out on the playoffs and somehow jumped from 12 or 13 into the top 5 somehow. But no, this is a team that needs to take that next step next season. And, we've kind of seen the blueprint of that since the All-Star break. They've become a lot more competitive. They're not getting blown out anymore. They're winning more games. But they're just not all the way there yet. It doesn't help that they're also dealing with a bunch of different injuries right now. But this is a team that next year should absolutely be out of the top 5. They should be competing for a play-in, for a playoff spot. Kate Cunningham is a phenomenal player. He's already shown he's the best player on this roster, and he's capable of leading the team to wins. He needs more talent around him. He needs a healthy Jerami Grant. He needs Sadiq Bey. He needs another guard to play with. He needs springy bigs like Marvin Bagley to play with, and the team needs more shooting. And the Pistons have the ability to address that this offseason. They have a top pick, and they have a ton of cap space. There's just really no excuse for them to go back to the top 5 of the lottery. And if they do, it's definitely disappointing, and it's a cause for concern.
Yeah, that's what Jasper and I felt. We both thought, there's no way the Pistons should be one of the worst 4 or 5 teams in the league again next year. Maybe one of the 4 worst teams. I think if they're looking at that, then that means Dwayne Casey's probably not the head coach anymore. It means that Troy Weaver's seat is not lukewarm. It's hot. And that's not a good sign for a young team that's trying to get its footing, is to be back in the lottery again. So yeah. Okay. All right. I just wanted your thoughts on that. So you had mentioned top pick. We'll be watching all of the top picks the next couple of weeks here with March Madness. I know I filled out my bracket. It's, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's extraordinarily chalky, and that worries me a lot because I'm going to get busted like I did with Ohio State and Oral Roberts that one year. That was a disaster. I feel like every time I pick Michigan State, they lose to a team like Little Rock, Arkansas, or whatever. I think that was a 15-2 that I lost a few years ago. So chalky brackets just worry me. Who are some teams that you like in particular in this bracket? I've got a few off the top of my head as well, but I will let you go first.
Okay, yeah, I really like Tennessee. They have a good mix of guard play. They have veterans across the roster. They won their conference tournament. They have a lot of quality wins across the board this season. So they're a team that I very, very much like. They can score inside and out. They play incredibly tough defensively. So I do very much like them. I also, it's a 1 seed, so I can't say, I'm super, super high on this team. Nobody knows about them, but I really like Arizona as well. Ben Mathurin is very, very intriguing to me, not only as a draft prospect, but as a player in this tournament. He's a big time player, and I watched him play their championship game against UCLA, where they went down 5 at half, could not score the ball in the first half for the life of them, but their defense kept them in it. And in the second half, they found their groove on the offensive end and, swung the game by 13 points in the second half, ended up winning by 8 against a very tough UCLA seed who has a 4 seed. They're going to be competitive in their own right. I think I have them at least in the Sweet 16 in all my brackets, but I think I have them in the Final 4 in one of them, or at least the Elite 8.
I do too. I think I have them in the Elite 8. I know I have them beating Baylor.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might have that in one of my brackets. I got different buddies that do different bracket pools. Right. So you got to do 2 or 3 brackets instead of just doing one. And, I try to mix it up a little bit since I'm doing different pools. And, but I really like Arizona. I really like Tennessee. A team that I don't think is going to win it all, but I think could go on a run in the tournament is Iowa. Keegan Murray's been playing very good basketball. They really found their groove in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, and a couple bounces, go the different way, and they end up winning that game and getting to, getting further in the tournament.
That was an insane game.
Yeah, I mean, they played a heck of a game.
Indiana.
And I don't know. I mean, I really like Keegan Murray, and I think Iowa has a ton of experience. They have shooters. I think they're a team that can really cause some damage. Those are probably 3 of my favorite teams. Like I said, I don't think Iowa has the juice to win it all, but I think Arizona and Tennessee both could be champions. But I think if I had to pick a champion, I'm picking between Gonzaga or Arizona.
Yeah, I've got Arizona and Gonzaga in the 2 brackets I currently have. I have to fill out one more before tomorrow at noon, so I'll be watching these couple games here. Yeah, I like Arizona a lot. I like UCLA a lot. I do like Iowa. I'm a little nervous because they also had a very good player last year in Luka Garza, and that did not translate entirely. Player of the year, Luka Garza. So I do like them. The easiest upsets for me are South Dakota State against Providence. I have the Jackrabbits winning. Loyola over Ohio State's the easiest upset, the 7-10. And I think I have Indiana, or I have Rutgers beating Alabama. That's an 11-6 upset as well. So to me, those are the easiest ones. All of those teams are kind of iffy. Providence can get slogged down on offense. Alabama has been so up and down the entire year. So I am not too high on them. I was really tempted to pick Chattanooga over Illinois, but I'm not gutsy enough to do that, and that'll probably come back to bite me. Chattanooga's offense is apparently otherworldly, really strong, and the Big Ten always kind of worries me in terms of basketball. Oh, I also have Michigan beating Colorado. To me, that's another easy upset. U of M getting in there. For all you Michigan fans out there, I picked the Wolverines.
As someone that at least used to consider himself a Wolverine fan, I do not have them winning, especially with the news that Devontae Jones is going to be out. So I'm picking Colorado in that, but I'll let you continue.
That's okay. There are just some teams that are harder to bet against when it comes to tournament time, like how Butler almost beat Providence, I think, in the first round of the Big East tournament. I thought, oh, well, here comes Butler. Once again, it's tournament time. That means Butler is, going to make a run, or VCU is one of those teams. Michigan is also one of those teams. They just play well. They're well coached, I think. I mean, people are a little bit down on Juwan Howard, but I still think that's a good team. And Hunter Dickinson is still there. And, he could be the best player on the court any game. And I think that has to factor in. And that, March is when some of these bigger names come out and they make their presence felt. I kind of have that same feeling with Duke. Like Duke could easily do that too with Paolo, but I just don't trust them to get past the Sweet 16 either. So, and any other teams that you like or don't like, or some players that you're going to be watching in particular? Like I am going to be watching, other than Chet and Paolo, and Jabari Smith, and I'll be probably watching Jaden Ivey quite a bit because I do like him potentially if the Pistons fall out of the top three. But any other teams or players that you are going to be watching?
Yeah, Ben Mathurin in Arizona. I really like him. He can shoot the ball and is a very athletic finisher inside. Lash Jackson of Detroit Bad Boys kind of compared him to as a Hamidou Diallo with a jump shot, and that is a player that is very, very. That's
a complete player.
So I'm definitely going to be watching him closely. I've watched Arizona a handful of times throughout the season, so I do like him. I have not watched a ton of Wisconsin, and a lot of my buddies really like Johnny Davis, so I'm going to try to watch them. And see how Davis plays. He can score the ball very well. That I do know that, but haven't watched him a ton. So definitely excited to see him. What's nice is that this year probably the first 10 to 12 guys that are going to be picked in the draft, they're all in the tournament. I don't know how common that is, but there's also usually one or two guys from overseas that are top draft picks, and that's really doesn't look like it's going to be the case this year. So all these guys are going to be playing in this tournament. So you're going to have so many games that have NBA prospects, first round draft picks in them. There's going to be so much talent to watch that, it's that March Madness is fun to watch as just a basketball fan and a college basketball viewer. But as an NBA person, you also get that added benefit of getting to watch these guys that are going to be playing in the NBA next year. So there's you can go down the entire bracket, and there's so many games that are you can circle and watch because there are going to be guys that are playing in the NBA next year. So I'm really excited, but definitely want to get a closer look at Jaden Ivey, Johnny Davis, Ben Mathurin, and AJ Griffin too. I like AJ Griffin as well. I know he's another guy that's really flown up draft boards lately, but I like him as well for Duke. And I do agree. Duke is a team that, they could get bounced super early, or they could make a very deep run. And I don't know if their conference tournament necessarily instilled a lot of confidence in them making a big run, but they could flip the switch and figure things out. And they just have the talent to do that. So definitely going to be watching them as well.
Yes, lots of players to watch, lots of teams to watch. Like I said, I think this is really tough. It's a tough year to pick. There's a lot of teams that kind of faltered throughout the year. There's a lot of teams that got red hot, like Virginia Tech. I have them beating Texas because I will ride the momentum wave. They win the conference tournament, they're in 11th seed. That tells me that they were probably not going to make the tournament had they not won the AC tournament. So pretty crazy. Aaron, any last thoughts before we go ahead and wrap up here?
No, I mean, absolutely excited for March Madness to begin, but keep it in mind that there's one NBA game on Thursday night, and that is your Detroit Pistons
that's right.
taking on the Orlando Magic in a tank fest. Cade Cunningham is, as of our recording on Wednesday night, questionable to play with an illness, but there will still be a large contingent of people, myself included, who will be watching that game Thursday night instead of watching some of the opening round matchups of March Madness.
Right.
So,
there will be 5 people watching that.
And I'll be one of them. And I'll be one of them. But
there'll be dozens of people watching. But yes, that's true. They get the primetime matchup there on Thursday against the Orlando Magic. So we hope that you'll be tuning in to that. We have at least spurred your interest in watching the Pistons a little bit. As disappointing as the season is, you still get to watch arguably the rookie of the year in Cade Cunningham. So we look forward to talking about him and Jerami Grant and the rest of the team in the last couple of weeks here of the season. And before we'll be talking lottery stuff, and it will be here a lot faster than we think. I say this every week for the past 3 weeks, but I need to start to really watch college players a little bit more closely, and now I get the perfect opportunity to do that. And you will as well. And we hope that if you are going to be watching any March Madness and want to consider placing any bets down, that you go ahead and use our sponsor for this week. That's Bet Online. Again, you can head on over to the website, use your mobile device, sign up today, and get your 50% welcome bonus for your first deposit using the promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV. Bet Online, where the game starts, and the game's going to be starting awfully soon. So for Aaron Johnson, my name is Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. We'll see you all next time.